Hello and good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, May 18th, 2020. Today is National Walnut Day, or I'm sorry, yesterday was National Walnut Day, so hope you all were able to enjoy some walnuts yesterday, whether that be in your pancakes, maybe on a cake or some bread, or maybe you just like to snack on a handful of mixed nuts that maybe you purchased from Costco while we're trying to store food and snacks and toiletries in our house during this global pandemic. But today is Monday, the 18th of May. So happy National No Dirty Dishes Day. That's right. Today is No Dirty Dishes Day. That means that we're just going to eat today without using any dishes. Put it on a napkin, grab a few bites, and go ahead and enjoy that for yourself. But let's not have any dirty dishes for today. A quick reminder for those of you who are joining us today, let's make sure that we type in any questions that we have for the week or comments or concerns for me to respond to, either regarding our class, health class, or PE, or maybe you have just a general question that you would like um, to address, like me to address. I'm more than willing and able and happy to do that for you during this Zoom session. We'll be on today just for an hour, so we're going to go 6 to 7 p.m. today on Monday. We will be back the rest of this week on Wednesday and Friday. That'll be in the morning, so 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. on both days, Wednesday and Friday of this week. That's going to be Wednesday, May 20th, and Friday, May 22nd. For those of you who stopped by Data School today for picking up your lunches. Sorry if I missed you. I wasn't on the front line today. I was there helping out pass out lunches. We were able to pass out 900 lunches for the week for students. You remember, do not have to be a VUSD student as long as you are in the area, a student, student aged, anyone, in high school or below, under the age of 18, you are more than welcome to pick up a lunch, no questions asked. We were also passing out bingo cards for you to play online. Health and Nutrition Services is organizing a digital bingo game for all of you students and families out there that may be interested. So if you didn't get your bingo card sheet and you would like one, let me know and I can try and organize getting that to you. Also, as a reminder that we are logging in PE activities. Your workout logs are on Google Classroom. Thank you for all of those individuals who have been logging those in. I will be giving you credit for that. Remember, it's extra credit. So for every 9 hours completed, I will bump your grade up from wherever it was the last day that we were in class. That was March 12th and 13th, Thursday, Friday, the 12th and 13th of March. Whatever your grade was at the end of that time, that was your third quarter grade, and we will bump it up one letter grade. So if you finished with a C on March 13th or for the end of the third quarter, and you complete 9 hours of activity and log that in your workout log, I'll bump your grade up one full letter grade. So from a C to a B. And so just make sure you log those hours in. You're able to put an entry in for every day of the week, even Saturday and Sunday. We want to make sure that we're staying active. I, on the other hand, have not been able to do my regular walks. So I usually try and walk about 5K. It's a little over 3 miles every day. Try and get that done in the morning so that any extra steps after breakfast and coffee is just icing on the top of the cake for me. But the last few days I haven't been able to do that. Been actually moving. So hey, want to give a huge shout out to the trio out there. You know who you are, trio, you wonderful 4 individuals of Foothill Tech High School. Thanks for stopping by my house the last 2 days ago, Saturday, dropping off some Krispy Kreme donuts for me. I enjoyed them. It was very delicious, and that was the last day that we were moving. So we moved all my stuff out from my previous home, and still living in the same area. So if you know where I live, I'm not too far from my old home. Um, and there's going to be someone living in there starting June 1st. Was really hoping that the trio didn't surprise me with that Krispy Kreme donut. As much as I loved it, I would have also loved this to see their faces once they tried to TP my house again. So unfortunately, they caught me, and they know that that's not my house anymore. So trio challenge is put out there. If you can find my house, I challenge you to TP the front of it. Last year, my house got TP'd, and they gave me a little extra surprise, not just toilet paper. We had some goldfish crackers sprinkled around the front yard and in the entranceway and all over my patio furniture. It was great. Thank you for sharing. I'm very much appreciative of you, Trio. You know who you are. And hopefully we see you soon. All right. Hey, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, excuse me, we are reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. We went ahead and finished about 2 weeks ago Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and have since started on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I think we started last week on Monday. We are only on chapter 4 today, and that was because we had a great Zoom bombing session last week by a few students, and we ended up putting the book on hold and answering some questions, exchanging some pleasantries. A little update on Nana. Nana is doing well. We are actually going to be dropping Nana off to San Diego this upcoming weekend. So she's going to spend about a month and a half over with my cousins at my cousin's house in San Diego. And she is super excited about that. If you remember from earlier during this quarantine, shortly after the Safer at Home order, she went down to San Diego. So she's going down to the same house. She was there for a month before. She's been here for a month, and she's going to go back for a month and a half. My aunt stays at home. Um, is a stay at home mom, and all my cousins, all but two, are grown up. They have there's four cousins that live there. Two are in college already and beyond, and the other two, one will be graduating this year as a senior, and the other one's going to be finishing up finishing up his 8th grade year, and starting high school next year. So, um, you know, probably going digitally for his high school. So we're excited for Nana going down there and spending some time with family again. And yeah, so she's super excited about that. All right, everyone. I know you've been waiting for this. So, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. We're on chapter 4. So if you're following along with us, we're at the very start of chapter 4, everyone, page 42 in my book. At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life on Privet Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with the strange and unexpected. Harry got a shock the first time he looked into the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, "Tuck your shirt in, Scruffy." The ghoul in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he felt things were getting too quiet, and small explosions from Fred and George's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's, however, was the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4th helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table so he could bombard him with questions about life with muggles, asking him to explain how things like plugs and the postal service worked. Fascinating, he would say, as Harry talked him through using a telephone. Ingenious, really. How many muggles, how many ways muggles have found of getting along without magic? Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning, about a week after he had arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to breakfast to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over when Harry entered her room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with her face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. Letters from school, said Mrs. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes of yellowish parchment, addressed in green ink. Dumbledore already knows you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man. You two've got them too, he added, as Fred and George ambled in, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry's told him to catch the Hogwarts Express as usual from King's Cross Station on September 1st. There was also a list of the new books he'd need for the coming year. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Goshawk, Break with a Banshee, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Gadding with Ghouls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Holidays with Hags, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Travels with Trolls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Voyages with Vampires, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Wanderings with Werewolves, by Gilderoy Lockhart, and Year with the Yeti, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. You've been told to get all Lockhart's books, too, he said. The new Defense Against the Dark arts teacher must be a fan. Bet it's a witch. At this point, Fred caught his mother's eyes and quickly bruised himself with the marmalade. That lot won't come cheap, said George, with a quick look at his parents. Lockhart's books are really expensive. Well, we'll manage, said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked worried. I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of Ginny's things secondhand. Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair, and put her elbow in the butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this except Harry, because just then Ron's elder brother, Percy, walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts prefect badge pinned to his sweater vest. Morning, all, said Percy briskly. Lovely day. He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leapt up again almost immediately, pulling from underneath him a molting gray feather duster. At least, that was what Harry thought it was, until he saw that it was breathing. Errol, said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. Finally, he's got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying we were going to try and rescue you from the Dursleys. He carried Errol to a perch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it. But Errol flopped straight off again, so Ron lay him on the draining board instead, muttering, Pathetic. Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it aloud. Dear Ron, and Harry, if you're there. I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay, and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry into trouble too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? But perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork, of course. How can she be? Said Ron in horror. We're on vacation. and we're going to London next Wednesday to buy my new books. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can. Love, from Hermione. Well, that fits in nicely. We can go and get all your things then, too, said Mrs. Weasley, starting to clear the table. What are you all up to today? Harry, Ron, Fred, and George were planning to go up the hill to a small paddock the Weasleys owned. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from the view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They couldn't use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they had escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples to one another to catch. They took turns riding Harry's Nimbus 2000, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often outstripped by passing butterflies. 5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They had asked Percy if he wanted to join them, but he had said he was busy. Harry had only seen Percy at mealtime so far. He stayed shut in his room the rest of the time. Wish I knew what he was up to, said Fred, frowning. He's not himself. His exam results came the day before you did, 12 owls, and he hardly gloated at all. Ordinary wizarding levels, George explained, seeing Harry's puzzled look. Bill got 12, too. If we're not careful, we'll have another head boy in the family. I don't think I could stand the shame. Bill was the oldest Weasley brother. He and the next brother, Charlie, had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but knew that Charlie was in Romania studying dragons, and Bill in Egypt working for the Wizards' Bank, Gringotts. Don't know how Mom and Dad are going to afford all our school stuff this year, said George after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart books, and Ginny needs robes and a wand and everything. Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Stored in an underground vault at Gringotts in London was a small fortune that his parents had left him. Of course, it was only in the wizarding world that he had money. You couldn't use galleons, sickles, and nuts and muggle shops. He had never mentioned his Gringotts bank account to the Dursleys. He didn't think their horror of anything connected with magic would stretch to a large pile of gold. Mrs. Weasley woke them all early the following Wednesday. After a quick half a dozen bacon sandwiches each, they pulled on their coats, and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. We're running low, Arthur, she sighed. We'll have to buy some more today. Ah, well, guess first. After you, Harry dear. And she offered him the flower pot. Harry stared at them while watching him. What am I supposed to do? He stammered. He's never traveled by Floo powder, said Ron suddenly. Sorry, Harry, I forgot. Never? Said Mr. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things last year? I went to the underground. Really? Said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Were there escapators? Escapators? How exactly? Not now, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Floo powder is a lot quicker. But goodness me, if you've never used it before. He'll be all right, Mom, said Fred. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of glittering powder out of the flower pot, stepped up to the fire, and threw the powder into the flames. With a roar, the fire turned emerald green and rose higher than Fred, who stepped right into it, shouted, Diagon Alley, and vanished. You must speak clearly, dear, said Mrs. Weasley, as George dipped his hand in the flower pot, and be sure to get out at the right grate. The right what? Said Harry, nervously as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. Well, there are an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you've spoken clearly. He'll be fine, Molly, don't fuss, said Mr. Weasley, helping him to Floo powder too. But dear, if he got lost, how would we ever explain to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't mind, Harry reassured her. Dudley would think it was a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't worry about that. Well, all right. You go after Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, when you get into the fire, say where you're going, and keep your elbows tucked in, Ron advised. And your eyes shut, said Mrs. Weasley. The suit. Don't fidget, said Ron, or you might well fall out of the wrong fireplace. But don't panic and get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George. Trying hard to bear all this in mind, Harry took a pinch of Floo powder and walked to the edge of the fire. He took a deep breath, scattered the powder into the flames, and stepped forward. The fire felt like a warm breeze. He opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. Diagon Alley, he coughed. It felt as though he was being sucked down a giant drain. He seemed to be spinning very fast. The roaring in his ears was deafening. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the whirl of green flames made him feel sick. Something hard knocked his elbow, and he tucked it in tightly. Still spinning and spinning, now it felt as though cold hands were slapping his face. Squinting through his glasses, he saw a blurred stream of fireplaces and snatched glimpses of the rooms beyond. His bacon sandwiches were churning inside him. He closed his eyes again, wishing it would stop. And then he fell, face forward, onto cold stone and felt the bridge of his glasses snap. Dizzy and bruised, covered in soot, he got gingerly to his feet, holding his broken glasses up to his eyes. He was quite alone, but where was he? He had no idea. All he could tell was that he was standing in the stone fireplace of what looked like a large, dimly lit wizard shop, but nothing here was ever likely to be on a Hogwarts school list. A glass case nearby held a withered hand on a cushion, a blood-stained pack of cards, and a staring glass eye. Evil-looking masks stared down from the walls. An assortment of human bones lay upon the counter, and rusty, spiked instruments hung from the ceiling. Even worse, the dark, narrow street Harry could see through the dusty shop window was definitely not Diagon Alley. The sooner he got out of here, the better. Not still stinging where it had hit the hearth, Harry made his way swiftly and silently toward the door. But before he'd gotten halfway toward it, two people appeared on the other side of the glass. And one of them was the very last person Harry wanted to meet when he was lost, covered in soot and wearing broken glasses. Draco Malfoy. Harry looked quickly around and spotted a large black cabinet to his left. He shot inside it and pulled the doors closed, leaving a small crack to peer through. Seconds later, a bell clanged, and Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who followed could only be Draco's father. He had the same pale, pointed face and identical cold gray eyes. Mr. Malfoy crossed the shop, looking lazily at the items on display, and rang a bell on the counter before turning to his son and saying, "Touch nothing, Draco." Malfoy, who had reached for the glass eye, said, "I thought you were going to buy me a present." "I said I would buy you a racing broom," said his father, drumming his fingers to the counter. "What's the good of that if I'm not on the house team?" said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. "Harry Potter got a Nimbus 2000 last year. Special permission from Dumbledore so he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead." Malfoy bent down to examine a shelf full of skulls. "Everyone thinks he's so smart. Wonderful Potter and his scar and his broomstick." "You have told me this at least a dozen times already," said Mr. Malfoy, with a quelling look at his son. "And I would remind you that it is not prudent to appear less than fond of Harry Potter, not when most of our kind regard him as a hero who made the Dark Lord disappear." "Ah, Mr. Brogan." A stooping man had appeared behind the counter, smoothing his greasy hair back from his face. Mr. Malfoy, what a pleasure to see you again, said Mr. Borgin in a voice as oily as his hair. Delighted. And young Master Malfoy, too. Charmed. How may I be of assistance? I must show you Justin today, and a very reasonably priced. I'm not buying today, Mr. Borgin, but selling, said Mr. Malfoy. Selling? The smile faded slightly from Mr. Borgin's face. You have heard, of course, that the Ministry is conducting more raids, said Mr. Malfoy, taking a roll of parchment from his inside pocket and unraveling it for Mr. Borgin to read. I have a few items at home that might embarrass me if the Ministry were to call. Mr. Borgin fixed a pair of pince-nez to his nose and looked down the list. The Ministry wouldn't presume to trouble you, sir, surely. Mr. Malfoy's lip curled. I have not been visited yet. The name Malfoy still commands a certain respect. Yet the Ministry grows ever more meddlesome. There are rumors about a new Muggle Protection Act. No doubt that flea-bitten, Muggle-loving fool Arthur Weasley is behind it. Harry felt a hot surge of anger. And as you see, certain of these potions might make it appear... I understand, sir. Of course, said Mr. Borgin. Let me see. Can I have that? Interrupted Draco, pointing at the withered hand on its cushion. Ah, the Hand of Glory, said Mr. Borgin, abandoning Mr. Malfoy's list and scurrying over to Draco. Insert a candle and it gives light only to the holder. Be best friend of thieves and plunderers. Your son has fine taste, sir. I hope my son will amount to more than a thief or a plunderer, Borgin, said Mr. Malfoy coldly. Mr. Borgin said quickly, No offense, sir, no offense meant. Though if his grades don't pick up, said Mr. Malfoy more coldly still, that may indeed be all he is fit for. It's not my fault, retorted Draco. The teachers all have favorites. That Hermione Granger. I would have thought you'd be ashamed of that girl of no wizard family beat you in every exam, snapped Mr. Malfoy. Ha! Said Harry under his breath, pleased to see Draco looking both abashed and angry. It's the same all over, said Mr. Borgin in his oily voice. Wizard blood is counting for less everywhere. Not with me, said Mr. Malfoy, his long nostrils flaring. No, sir. Nor with me, sir, said Mr. Borgin with a deep bow. In that case, perhaps we can return to my list, said Mr. Malfoy shortly. I am in something of a hurry, Borgin. I have important business elsewhere today. They started to haggle. Harry watched nervously as Draco drew nearer and nearer to his hiding place, examining the objects for sale. Draco paused to examine a long coil of hangman's rope and to read, smirking, the card propped on a magnificent necklace of opals. Caution, do not touch. Cursed. Has claimed the lives of 19 Muggle owners to date. Draco turned away and saw the cabinet right in front of him. He walked forward. He stretched out his hand for the handle. Done, said Mr. Malfoy at the counter. Come, Draco. Harry wiped his forehead on his sleeve as Draco turned away. Good day to you, Mr. Borgin. I'll expect you at the manor tomorrow to pick up the goods. The moment the door had closed, Mr. Borgin dropped his oily manner. Good day yourself, Mr. Malfoy. And if the stories are true, you haven't sold me half of what's hidden in your manor. Muttering darkly, Mr. Borgin disappeared into a back room. Harry waited for a minute in case he came back. Then, quietly as he could, slipped out of the cabinet, past the glass cases, and out of the shop door. Clutching his broken glasses to his face, Harry stared around. He had emerged into a dingy alleyway that seemed to be made up entirely of shops devoted to the dark arts. The one he'd just left, Borgin and Burke's, looked like the largest, but opposite was a nasty window display of shrunken heads, and 2 doors down, A large cage was alive with gigantic black spiders. Two shabby-looking wizards were watching him from the shadow of a doorway, muttering to each other. Feeling jumpy, Harry set off, trying to hold his glasses on straight and hoping against hope he'd be able to find a way out of here. An old wooden street sign hanging over the shop selling poisonous candles told him he was in Nocturne Alley. This didn't help, as Harry had never heard of such a place. He supposed he hadn't spoken clearly enough through his mouthful of ashes back in the Weasley's fire. Trying to stay calm, he wondered what to do. "Not lost, are you, my dear?" said a voice in his ear, making him jump. An aged witch stood in front of him, holding a tray of what looked horribly like whole human fingernails. She leered at him, showing mossy teeth. Harry backed away. "I'm fine, thanks," he said. "I'm just... Harry, what do you think you're doing down there?" Harry's heart leapt. So did the witch. A load of fingernails cascaded down over her feet, and she cursed as the massive form of Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper, came striding toward them, beetle black eyes flashing over his great bristly beard. "Hagrid!" Harry croaked in relief. "I was lost. Flue powder!" Hagrid seized Harry by the scruff of the neck and pulled him away from the witch, knocking the tray right out of her hands. Her shrieks followed them all the way along the twisting alleyway into the bright sunlight. Harry saw a familiar, snow-white marble building in the distance, Gringotts Bank. Hagrid had steered him right into Diagon Alley. "You're a mess," said Hagrid, gruffly, brushing soot off Harry so forcefully he nearly knocked him into a barrel of dragon dung outside an apothecary. "Sulking around Nocturne Alley? I don't know. Dodgy place, Harry. Don't want no one to see you down there." "I realize that," said Harry, ducking as Hagrid made to brush him off again. "I told you I was lost. What were you doing down there anyway?" "I was looking for a flesh-eating slug repellent," growled Hagrid. "They're ruining the school cabbages." "You're not on your own." "I'm staying with the Weasleys, but we got separated," Harry explained. "I've got to go and find them." They set off together down the street. "How come you never wrote back to me?" said Hagrid as Harry jogged alongside him. He had to take 3 steps to every stride of Hagrid's enormous boots. Harry explained all about Dobby and the Dursleys. "Lousy muggles," growled Hagrid. "If I'd known—" "Harry! Harry! Over here!" Harry looked up and saw Hermione Granger sitting at the top of a white flight of steps to Gringotts. She ran down to meet them, her bushy brown hair flying behind her. "What happened to your glasses?" "Hello, Hagrid." "Oh, it's wonderful to see you two again. Are you coming into Gringotts, Harry?" "As soon as I have found the Weasleys," said Harry. "You won't have to wait," Hagrid said with a grin. Harry and Hermione looked around. Sprinting up the crowded street were Ron, Fred, George, Percy, and Mr. Weasley. "Harry," Mr. Weasley panted, "we hoped you'd only gone one grade too far." He mopped his glistening bald patch. "Molly's frantic. She's coming now." "Where did you come out?" Ron asked. "Nocturne Alley," said Hagrid grimly. "Excellent," said Fred and George together. "We've never been allowed in," said Ron enviously. "I should pretty well think not," growled Hagrid. Mrs. Weasley came galloping into view, her handbag swinging wildly in one hand, Ginny just clinging on to the other. "Oh, Harry! Oh, my dear! You could have been anywhere!" Gasping for breath, she pulled a large clothes brush out of her bag and began sweeping off the soot Hagrid hadn't managed to beat away. Mr. Weasley took Hagrid's glasses, gave him a tap of his wand, and returned them, good as new. "Well, gotta be off," said Hagrid, who was having his hand wrung by Mrs. Weasley. "Nocturne Alley. If you hadn't found him, Hagrid, see you at Hogwarts." And he strode away, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the packed street. "Guess who I saw in Bergen and Berks?" Harry asked Ron and Hermione as they climbed the Gringotts steps. Malfoy and his father. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley sharply behind them. No, he was selling. So he's worried, said Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction. Ah, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something. You be careful, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley sharply as they were bowed into the bank by a goblin at the door. That family's trouble. Don't go biting off more than you can chew. So you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy? Said Mr. Weasley indignatedly. But he was distracted almost at once by the sight of Hermione's parents, who were standing nervously at the counter that ran all along the great marble hall, waiting for Hermione to introduce them. But you're muggles, said Mr. Weasley delightedly. We must have a drink. What's that you've got there? Oh, you're changing muggle money? Molly, look, he pointed excitedly at the 10-pound notes in Mr. Granger's hand. Meet you back here, Ron said to Hermione as the Weasleys and Harry were led off to the underground vaults by another Gringotts goblin. The vaults were reached by means of small goblin-driven carts that sped along miniature train tracks through the bank's underground tunnels. Harry enjoyed the breakneck journey down to the Weasley's vault, but felt dreadful, far worse than he had in Knockturn Alley when it was opened. There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside, and just one gold galleon. Mrs. Weasley felt right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. Harry felt even worse when they reached his vault. He tried to block the contents from view as he hastily shoved handfuls of coins into a leather bag. Back outside on the marble steps, they all separated. Percy muttered vaguely about needing a new quill. Fred and George had spotted their friend from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were going to a second-hand robe shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking the Grangers off to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. We'll all meet at Flourish and Blott's in an hour to buy your schoolbook, said Mrs. Weasley, setting off with Ginny. And not one step down Knockturn Alley, she shouted as the twins retreating backs. Harry, Ron, and Hermione strolled off along the windy, cobbled street, the bag of gold, silver, and bronze jangling cheerfully in Harry's pocket, was clamoring to be spent. So he bought 3 large strawberry and peanut butter ice creams, which they slurped happily as they wandered up the alley, examining the fascinating shop windows. Ron gazed longingly at a full set of Chudley Cannon robes in the window of Quality Quidditch Supplies, until Hermione dragged them off to buy ink and parchment next door. In Gamble and Jape's Wizarding Joke Shop, they met Fred, George, and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on Dr. Filibuster's fabulous wet start, no heat fireworks. And in a tiny junk shop full of broken wands, lopsided brass scales, and old cloaks covered in potion stains, they found Percy, deeply immersed in a small and deeply boring book called Prefects Who Gained Power. A study of Hogwarts prefects and their latter careers, Ron read aloud off the back cover. That sounds fascinating. Go away, Percy snapped. Of course, he's very ambitious, Percy. He's got it all planned out. He wants to be the Minister of Magic, Ron told Harry and Hermione in an undertone as they left Percy to it. An hour later, they headed to Flourish and Blott's. They were by no means the only ones making their way to the bookshop. As they approached it, they saw to their surprise a large crowd jostling outside the doors, trying to get in. The reason for this was proclaimed by a large banner stretched across the upper window. Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We could actually meet him, Hermione squealed. I mean, he's written almost the whole book list. The crowd seemed to be made up mostly of witches around Mrs. Weasley's age. A harassed-looking wizard stood at the door, saying calmly, "Please, ladies, don't push there. Mind the books now." Harry, Ron, and Hermione squeezed inside. A long line wound right to the back of the shop where Gilderoy was signing his books. They each grabbed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, and sneaked up the line to where the rest of the Weasleys were standing with Mr. and Mrs. Granger. "Oh, there you are. Good," said Mrs. Weasley. She sounded breathless and kept patting her hair. "We'll be able to see him in a minute." Gilderoy Lockhart came slowly into view, seated at a table surrounded by large pictures of his own face, all winking and flashing dazzlingly white teeth at the crowd. The real Lockhart was wearing robes of forget-me-not blue, and exactly matched his eyes. His pointed wizard's hat was set at a jaunting angle on his wavy hair. A short, irritable-looking man was dancing around taking photographs with a large black camera that emitted puffs of purple smoke with every blinding flash. "Out of the way there," he snarled at Ron, moving back to get a better shot. "This is for the Daily Prophet." "Big deal," said Ron, rubbing his foot where the photographer had stepped uh, on it. Gilderoy Lockhart heard him. He looked up. He saw Ron, and then he saw Harry. He stared. Then he leapt to his feet and positively shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter." The crowd parted, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seizing Harry's arm, and pulled him to the front. The crowd burst into applause. Harry's face burned as Lockhart shook his hand for the photographer, who was clicking away madly, wafting thick smoke over the Weasleys. "Nice big smile, Harry," said Lockhart through his own gleaming teeth. "Together, you and I are worth the front page." When he finally let go of Harry's hand, Harry could hardly feel his fingers. He tried to settle back over to the Weasleys, but Lockhart threw an arm around his shoulder and clamped him tightly to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, waving for quiet, "what an extraordinary moment this is. The perfect moment for me to make a little announcement I've been sitting on for some time. When young Harry here stepped into Flourish and Blots today, he only wanted to buy my autobiography, which I shall be happy to present him now, free of charge." The crowd applauded again. "He had no idea," Lockhart continued, giving Harry a little shake that made his glasses slip to the end of his nose, that he would shortly be getting much, much more than my book, Magical Me. He and his schoolmates will, in fact, be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure and pride in announcing that this September, I'll be taking up the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The crowd cheered and clapped, and Harry found himself being presented with the entire works of Gilderoy Lockhart. Staggering slightly under their weight, he managed to make his way out of the limelight to the edge of the room, where Ginny was standing next to her new cauldron. "You have these," Harry mumbled to her, tipping the books into the cauldron. "I'll buy my own." "Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter?" said a voice Harry had no trouble recognizing. He straightened up and found himself face to face with Draco Malfoy, who was wearing his usual sneer. "Famous Harry Potter," said Malfoy. "Can't even go to a bookstore without making the front page." "Leave him alone. He didn't want all that," said Ginny. It was the first time she had spoken in front of Harry. She was glaring at Malfoy. "Potter, you've got yourself a girlfriend," drawled Malfoy. Ginny went scarlet as Ron and Hermione fought their way over, both clutching stacks of Lockhart's books. "Oh, it's you," said Ron, looking at Malfoy as if he were something unpleasant on the sole of his shoe. "Bet you're surprised to see Harry here, huh?" "Not as surprised I am to see you in a shop, Weasley," retorted Malfoy. "I suppose your parents will go hungry for a month to pay for all those." Ron went as red as Ginny. He dropped his books into the cauldron too, and started toward Malfoy, but Harry and Hermione grabbed the back of his jacket. Ron, said Mr. Weasley, struggling over with Fred and George. What are you doing? It's too crowded in here. Let's go outside. Well, well, well. Arthur Weasley. It was Mr. Malfoy. He stood with his hand on Draco's shoulder, sneering in just the same way. Lucius, said Mr. Weasley, nodding coldly. Busy time at the ministry, I hear, said Mr. Malfoy. All those raids. I hope they're paying you overtime. He reached into Ginny's cauldron and extracted from amid the glossy Lockhart books a very old, very better copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Obviously not, Mr. Malfoy said. Dear me, what's the use of being a disgrace to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you well for it? Mr. Weasley flushed darker than either Ron or Ginny. We have a very different idea of what disgraces the name of wizard, Malfoy, he said. Clearly, said Mr. Malfoy, his pale eyes straying to Mr. and Mrs. Granger, who were watching apprehensively. The company of you, Weasley? And I thought your family could sink no lower. There was a thud of metal as Ginny's cauldron went flying. Mr. Weasley had thrown himself at Mr. Malfoy, knocking him backward into a bookshelf. Dozens of heavy spellbooks came thundering down on all their heads. There was a yell of, "Get him, Dad!" from Fred and George. Mrs. Weasley was shrieking, "No, Arthur, no!" The crowd stamped backward, knocking more shelves over. Gentlemen, please," cried the assistant. And then, louder than all, "Break it up there, gents, break it up." Hagrid was wadding toward them through the sea of books. In an instant, he had pulled Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy apart. Mr. Weasley had a cut lip, and Mr. Malfoy had been hit in the eye by an encyclopedia of toadstools. He was still holding Ginny's old Transfiguration book. He thrust it at her, his eyes glittering with malice. "Here, girl, take your book. It's the best your father can give you." Pulling himself out of Hagrid's grip, he beckoned to Draco and swept from the shop. "Yeah, should have ignored him, Arthur," said Hagrid, almost lifting Mr. Weasley off his feet as he straightened his robes. "Rotten to the core, the whole family. Everyone knows that. No Malfoy's worth listening to. Bad blood, that's what it is. Come on now, let's get out of here." The assistant looked as though he wanted to stop them. He wanted to stop them leaving, but he barely came up to Hagrid's waist and seemed to think better of it. They hurried up the street, the Grangers shaking with frights, and Mrs. Weasley beside herself with fury. A fine example to set for your children, brawling in public. What Gilderoy Lockhart must have thought. He was pleased, said Fred. Didn't you hear him as we were leaving? He was asking that bloke from the Daily Prophet if he'd been able to work the fight into his report. He said it was all publicity. But it was a subdued group that headed back to the fireside in the Leaky Cauldron, where Harry, the Weasleys, and their shopping would be traveling back to the Burrow using Floo powder. They said goodbye to the Grangers, who were leaving the pub for the Muggle Street on the other side. Mr. Weasley started to ask them how bus stops worked, but stopped quickly at the look on Mrs. Weasley's face. Harry took off his glasses and put them safely in his pocket before helping himself to Floo powder. It definitely wasn't his favorite way to travel. And that is the end of Chapter 4. Well, everyone, we're going to leave it there for the day. We'll pick back up on Wednesday. Remember, we are going to go Wednesday morning, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. We'll start on Chapter 5 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Quick reminder to everyone, let's make sure that we are filling out our workout logs if you're in PE class. And for those of you who are in health class, I'll be posting another thought question this week, just a quick short answer response, quick right response for you for that. And we'll get going. I think there should be an email coming up pretty soon, maybe today or tomorrow, sometime this week, regarding end of the year activities for seniors. So if you have a sibling who's a senior this year, we'll be getting that out. I do know that Mr. Frazier, Mad Dog Frazier, talked a few weeks ago about finishing the yearbook already. So information on, being able to pick those up from school, yearbooks that you had already purchased at the beginning of the school year. That should be coming up in some information pretty soon. I know there was a little trouble with Edgenuity earlier in the week. I know we're not logging on to Edgenuity for health or for PE. So, hopefully if you had some trouble, don't worry. The district is on it, and they're trying to get it fixed. Hopefully it's fixed already. If not, then hopefully soon. And those of you picking up lunches for next week, reminder that next week, Monday, is Memorial Day, which is a holiday. I know it feels like we've been on a holiday for the last 65 days, but it is an official holiday. Banks are closed and for sure because of that holiday. And we will not be passing out lunches next week on Monday. So come by to school next week on Tuesday to pick up a lunch for the week. And yeah, I think there should be some information coming up soon. I spoke to Mrs. Duffy last week about end of the year closeouts, and if you're on an athletics team for the spring or the winter and haven't turned in your uniform yet, there'll be procedures on turning that in and making sure that gets checked back in. Turning in your PE lockers. So either Mrs. Stevens or myself will be there collecting PE locks. Remember, if you are not able to, if you lost your lock for whatever reason, or it was stolen, then there is a replacement fee for it. It's $5. So if you shared your locker with someone, then you and your locker partner should, I would assume, share that cost. So $2.50 each, and replace the lock that was in the PE locker that was either lost or stolen. All right. I think that's it for now. If you have anything else, doesn't look like there was any questions or comments written in the chat box for today. If you're listening in after hours, thanks for joining us. I'll have this posted pretty quickly on our Google Docs spreadsheet for today, Monday, May 18th. Should be up to date. There are some workouts on that sheet, as well as handouts that were passed out the last few weeks. I know there was a Thor WOD workout for you to try last week. And the week prior, I think there was some exercises for your hand and wrist. So if you've been, on Edgenuity or Canvas or Google Classroom for long periods of time, some stretches and workouts, for your hand and wrist, so it's not too strained. Or for my gaming friends, holding that controller in your hand and getting things done. Yeah, a little workout for you for that. All right, everyone. Hey, have a great rest of the day. Have an awesome day tomorrow, Tuesday, and we will see and hear from you on Wednesday morning at 9:30. All right, have a great rest of the day, everyone, and until Wednesday. All right, bye-bye.